Chapter 44. Jacob's face became very tight. "Please don't say it, Edward. Not yet. It's nothing you need to worry about this second." I heard Emmett laugh inside the house. "This is going to be excellent," he thought, rubbing his hands together. I rolled my eyes, turning to smile at Bella, only to find her face completely still, a mirror of want and fear and stress. "Renesmee?" she choked out, emotion clouding her voice. She seemed almost afraid to breathe, as if Renesmee was already in front of her. "Come and see," I said quietly. The time had definitely come. I had seen Bella demonstrate her control beyond anything that I could have imagined. It was time for her to meet her daughter. "You'll help me?" she whispered, anxiety in her eyes. "Of course I will." "And Emmett and Jasper, just in case?" "We'll take care of you, Bella. Don't worry. We'll be ready. None of us would risk Renesmee. I think you'll be surprised at how entirely she's wrapped all of us around her little fingers. She'll be perfectly safe, no matter what." Bella looked up towards the house for a moment, her eyes yearning, and then she took a tentative step towards the house. "No way!" Jacob was in front of her, blocking her path, his face strained. "Are you sure, bloodsucker? Is this just you, giving her what she wants like always? I don't like this. Maybe she should wait." I ground my teeth. Did he think that I had no consideration for Renesmee's safety, as well as Bella's happiness? That he was the only one capable of protecting her? "You had your test, Jacob," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe he's right, Edward," Jasper thought from within the house, glancing with worried eyes at Nessie in Rosalie's arms. I realized Renesmee was now only showing her images of Bella's face after her birth, an insistent quality to her thoughts now. She was asking to see Bella. This, above everything else, made my decision for me. My family would understand when I explained about what happened in the forest. "But," Jacob sputtered. "But nothing," I spat, beyond sick of his continued interference. "Bella needs to see our daughter. Ours, not yours. Get out of her way." Jacob shot a look at Bella, at her blood-stained clothes, at her bright crimson eyes. "This is crazy." He turned and bolted towards the house. "This is crazy. I won't let Nessie get hurt." I growled after him, and then glanced at Bella. She looked confused and worried. Damn him. I tried to smooth my features. I didn't want to let Jacob's antics interfere with this moment for Bella. "Shall we?" I asked gently. Bella nodded, looking anxious. I grabbed her hand, holding it tight, her skin barely giving it all under mine, and pulled her towards the house. Inside, my family was moving swiftly, gathering in a formation that had been discussed while we were in the forest. Jasper, in something of an unusual panic for him, was pointing silent instructions. Rosalie stood by the front door, holding Nessie, ready to leave the room at the slightest hint of aggravation from Bella. This was for safety, as well as the hope that Renesmee would not have to see Bella violently restrained, if it came to that. My stomach sickened at the thought. That won't happen. Several feet in front of her, Jasper and Emmett waited, with Carlyle on one side and Esme and Alice on the other. Jasper and Emmett were there to restrain, the rest of my family to protect, offense and defense. As always, Jasper was thorough. As we approached the house, Jacob paused for a moment at the door, but as soon as we neared, he darted to the back of the room next to Rosalie. She glared distastefully at him. "I was hoping you'd be dead the next time I saw you, mutt," she grumbled to herself. Jacob eyed her as if he knew what she was thinking, and then stood in front of them. My family was smiling calmly, but their thoughts and emotions, seeping into Jasper, betrayed their anxiety. Surprisingly, none of them seemed to know what had occurred during the hunt with the humans. I had assumed Alice would have told them. I searched her mind, but it was fully occupied with the image of Bella. She was nearly choking in horror at the sight of Bella's dress.
Dear God, it's even worse in reality.
Renesmee was straining to see around the line of my family. She caught sight of me first.
Daddy!
Then her luminous eyes focused on Bella as I drew her carefully forward. Bella froze as Renesmee came into her view.
I was only out just 2 days,
she gasped, obviously taking in Renesmee's enormous growth over the last few days. Jasper's muscles tensed as he read her obvious shock. Too much, Edward. It's too much to ask. Renesmee started at the sound of Bella's voice, her eyes widening slightly. She grasped onto the sound, replaying it in her head several times, while her eyes scoured Bella's face. She brought up an image of Bella, of a human Bella, in the moments of her birth.
Renesmee, so beautiful.
The light, airy quality of Bella's human voice was in stark comparison to the singing phrase we had all just heard leave her lips. Renesmee grew slightly anxious with confusion, and Jasper shifted, worried about her, resisting the urge to glance back. Renesmee lifted a small hand to Rose's throat.
Bella!
Her mind still held the picture of Bella after her birth, but there was a new, questioning tone to the image. Her eyes never left Bella's.
Yes, that's her,
Rose said softly, brushing her fingers over Nessie's hand.
That's your mother.
I caught the slightest bittersweet inflection of Rosalie's thoughts in this moment.
Bella.
Renesmee's mind turned the dueling images and sounds around for a moment, surrounded by the tumbling memories of before her birth, of the voice, caressing and adoring, that had been her world, her whole world. Then it all melded together into a distinct, dazzling form, a singular love, and suddenly her small heart sang with unparalleled joy, and a brilliant smile broke out across her face.
Bella! Mommy!
And at that moment, Bella moved towards her. Stop her, Edward, Jasper thought. I gripped the tops of her arms hard, propelled by his panic. Emmett and Jasper moved swiftly to form a solid wall between Bella and Renesmee, the others dropping back to create a second barrier. Rose moved several feet back, so that she was pressed to the wall next to the door.
Should I go? Should I go?
Jacob stepped with her, keeping his body between Nessie and Bella. I knew it, he growled. Jasper's eyes were cool, alert. Hold her. I can calm her as much as possible so we can get her out of here. Alice hadn't moved. She glanced at my grip on Bella disapprovingly.
You know she's fine, Edward,
she chided me. I came slightly back to my senses, trying to disentangle myself from Jasper's worry. She was right. Bella's movement had been a tentative step, not an aggressive move. I shook my head slightly at Jasper, and he frowned. I knew firsthand Bella's immaculate control, and I sensed it was still tightly in place. Looking at Alice's mind now, I realized she had seen what had happened in the forest, and the incredible feat Bella had accomplished.
No, I didn't tell them,
she thought. She looked back at the tense lines of my family.
But you better, if you want them to relax. Oh, give her some credit,
she said.
She wasn't going to do anything. You'd want a closer look, too.
Everyone glanced around skeptically. Bella was breathing steadily now.
"I'm okay,"
she said quietly, touching one of my hands, still clamped to her upper arm.
"Keep close, though, just in case." "Bella! Mommy!"
Nessie, blocked by Jacob from her view of Bella, was struggling now in Rose's arms. Bella's new face filled her mind, the emphasis demanding. I looked at Jasper, and his face was tight with anxiety. Concentrating on Bella, Jasper could feel the intense want, the need, for Bella to see her child rolling off her, and he could also sense her anxiety. Her emotions are strong, Edward. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad, appropriate or inappropriate. In a newborn, strong emotions of any kind equals trouble. You know this. She won't be able to keep herself in hand. But I knew Bella could do this. She was not the typical newborn Jasper imagined. Chaz, Em, let us through. Bella's got this. Emmett relaxed. Okay, Edward, your call. But Jasper didn't move. He was unhappy with the volatility of the situation. He carried a heavy burden, feeling responsible for the safety of everyone involved. He couldn't stand the idea of Nessie being hurt, and I realized he was also extremely concerned about Alice being hurt, trying to intercede on Bella's part in some sort of scuffle. Jasper's thoughts became laced with panic. The baby is so small. We don't know how badly Bella could hurt her. Edward, the risk. Minimal, I said. I needed to explain to him exactly why I could trust Bella, so he could relax. Listen, Jasper. On the hunt, she caught scent of some hikers who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Carlyle gasped. Oh no, he thought in horror. I glanced over in surprise, and then immediately realized he had misunderstood what I was going to say. His eyes flared with shock. You should not have insisted on going alone. Ah, thought Jasper, with a little too much satisfaction. That explains the lack of thirst. Esme eyed me with alarm, searching my eyes.
"Oh dear, I hope Edward didn't as well."
She realized, rightfully so, the nearly impossible temptation such a scene would entail, even for us. Disgusting, Jacob thought, eyeing the blood on Bella's dress in horror. No way she's coming near Nessie now. Alice rolled her eyes internally.
"Oh, ye of little faith! Tell them, Edward."
She was still much more concerned about the state of Bella's dress. Edward, Carlyle admonished, I'm disappointed in you. How could you be so irresponsible? I know, Carlyle, I know. He was right. Although miraculously everything had been fine, my actions had been reprehensible, given my promise to Bella. I was just plain stupid. I should have taken the time to make sure we were in a safe zone before I set her loose. So how many did she get, man? Emmett thought excitedly, thinking of his wager with Jasper. This is sweet. I am so gonna win this bet. He shut his eyes briefly, imagining himself riding on the back of Jasper's, formerly my motorcycle, Rose's long arms and legs wrapped around him. All mine for a whole year.
"Edward,"
said Bella, her voice pained with embarrassment.
"Poor thing, she didn't want us to know,"
thought Esme.
"I hope she doesn't feel she's let us down."
He's absolutely right to rebuke me, Bella, I said with a smile. This was actually kind of fun. Even Carlyle, the eternal optimist, was buying into it. I made a huge mistake. The fact that you're stronger than anyone I've ever known doesn't change that. Alice was the only one who caught my play on the word stronger. She knew I didn't mean physically stronger. She rolled her eyes.
"Tasteful joke, Edward. Tell them you're upsetting my sister."
You're being very flippant about this, Edward. Carlyle thought disapprovingly. "This is no time for joking." "I wasn't making a joke," I smiled. "I was explaining to Jasper why I know Bella can handle this. It's not my fault everyone jumped to conclusions." "Wait," said Jasper suddenly. "What did you mean by stronger?" "She didn't hunt the humans." "Impossible." "She started to," I said slowly, trying to draw out the suspense a little longer. I heard Bella's teeth grind together, and Jasper glanced at her, sensing frustration. She was entirely focused on the hunt. "What happened?" Carlyle asked suddenly, realization starting to fill his eyes. I felt a flush of pride and excitement suddenly. "She heard me behind her and reacted defensively. As soon as my pursuit broke into her concentration, she snapped right out of it. I've never seen anything to equal her. She realized at once what was happening, and then—" I paused dramatically, most of my family stock still with anticipation, except for Rosalie, who was struggling in the back to contain Renesmee.
"For God's sake, spit it out, Edward,"
she thought irritably. I grinned and continued, speaking each word slowly and carefully. "She held her breath and ran away." "Whoa," said Emmett. "Are you screwing with us, Eddie? Seriously?" Carlyle clapped his hands together. "Wonderful, amazing. She's one of a kind, always has been." He smiled down with relief at Esme, who was beaming at Bella. "I don't believe it," Jasper thought, utterly stunned.
"Okay, great,"
thought Rose.
"No dead human. Now can we get on with this?"
Jacob just stared silently, still looking suspicious. Bella huffed in irritation.
"He's not telling it right," she grumbled. "He left out the part where I growled at him."
"Oh, now we're talking," Emmett thought with glee. "Did you get in a couple of good swipes?" he asked, glancing at me and looking for signs of a struggle. "Is that what happened to the dress? You guys get in some kind of tussle?" His grin widened.
"No,"
said Bella, her face shocked.
"Of course not."
Emmett's eyes shot back to her. "No? Really? You really didn't attack him? She's not just saying that to protect your wounded pride, is she?"
"Emmett,"
Bella said desperately. "Ah, what a waste," Emmett groaned. He glared at me, and I grinned with delight. "You're such a wuss," he thought. "And here you're probably the one person who could take him, since it can't get into your head to cheat. And you had a perfect excuse, too," he said with a sigh. "I've been dying to see how he would do without that advantage." Bella looked affronted.
"I would never."
"She broke off the hunt, didn't attack you, didn't take the humans, but actually left of her own volition." Jasper's thought was not a question, but rather an unbelieving restatement of the facts. His expression was clouded. I mocked punched his shoulder in an attempt to get him out of his continued bad spirits. "You see what I mean?" "It's not natural," he muttered without a smile. "Abnormal, and that means unpredictable." I sighed. Esme was realizing with horror exactly how close Bella must have been to attacking me.
"You know you should never have gotten that close to someone on the hunt, Edward. She could have turned on you. She's only hours old. Better to have let her go after the humans than risk injury on either one of you."
"I was careful, Esme," I said reassuringly. "She's right, though, Edward. We should have come," said Carlyle. "Still, it all worked out." "That it did," I said, smiling down at Bella. My hands were still on her shoulders, my grip loose now, and she leaned suddenly to the side, trying to see around Jasper's form.
"Edward,"
she whispered.
"Please."
And that one word cut right through me, piercing with its emotion. holding an inexorable power over me, as it always did. I glanced up at Jasper, nodding for him to move aside. Jasper's teeth clenched. "It's not right. It doesn't feel right."
Jazz, this isn't like anything you've seen before. Trust me.
Alice spoke quietly, drawing in his gaze, her eyes saying much more than the words. She channeled her confidence, the confidence she had gained watching how Bella had reacted in the forest, and her love, reminding him she would never lead him wrong. Jasper nodded. "I trust you, Alice, always." Looking back, he moved aside slightly, putting a hand on Bella's shoulder, holding it as a restraint as well as a conduit for emotion. "Be ready, Edward. Regardless of what you think is going on here, always be ready." I nodded at him reassuringly, keeping my hands on Bella's upper arms. Alice stood next to Jasper, and as Bella took her first steps forward, Carlyle and Esme turned, walking a couple of steps in front of us, their bodies angled so they could watch Bella carefully.
Bella! Mommy!
Renesmee was increasingly frustrated by our slow progress towards her. As we neared, her sweet, lilting scent began to fill the space around us, her heart hammered with her efforts to get out of Rose's grasp. "I sense some thirst," thought Jasper in alarm. I brought my attention back to Bella, firming my grip slightly. Suddenly, Renesmee let out a high, piercing wail, like nothing I had ever heard from her before. It shot quickly to the forefront of everything else, panic spiraling instantly inside of me. "Is she hurt?" I whirled in alarm, my feet propelling me to her side, my only thought making sure she was all right. "Is she okay?" I asked Rose, checking Renesmee over anxiously, my hands running quickly over her arms and legs and head. I looked carefully into her eyes. She seemed perfect. "What happened?" Jacob demanded, his shoulder pressing against mine as he pushed in to see her.
What's the matter?
asked Esme, touching her cheek. Carlyle was trying to get by Jacob so he could look more closely. Alice had her hands on my arm, while Emmett peered over both of us. Only Jasper had remained at Bella's side, although he had taken a step forward in concern. "Is she hurt?" Jacob reached out, placing his hands under Renesmee's arms. Rosalie sighed, but let him take her.
"All right, you try containing her." "She's fine," she said to Jacob. Jacob glanced up at me with worried eyes, and then looked down, searching Renesmee for signs of injury. Renesmee lifted her hand and placed her palm against his cheek, keeping her eyes on Bella. Jacob's head filled with Bella's face, the tone of the thought insistent. "See?"
Rose said.
"She just wants Bella." "She wants me?"
Bella whispered. We glanced quickly back. Her body was leaning forward slightly, as if drawn to Nessie. "Edward," Jasper thought sharply, afraid she was going to move forward. I moved swiftly back to Bella's side, not to restrain her as Jasper wanted, but to bring her forward, to meet her daughter. I got behind her again and put my hands on her arms, pressing her forward. They had been lost to each other for too long. Now it was time for them to be together. "She's been waiting for you for almost 3 days," I whispered in her ear. As we moved closer, Emmett came to stand at Bella's side again, Jasper never taking his hand from her shoulder. Carlyle, Esme, and Dallas had remained at their places next to Jacob, Rosalie just behind at his shoulder. Jacob's hands were shaking, but it was out of sheer anxiety, not the tremors that precipitated phasing. Still, I saw Bella glance nervously at his hands.
"Jake, I'm fine,"
she said. For how long? He stared into her eyes, trying to gauge her mood. I can't tell anything from those damn red eyes. Renesmee was straining in his arms, her hands reaching and grasping for Bella. As we came within a step of them, Bella suddenly froze. We all stilled with her, no one breathing except for Jacob and Nessie. No sounds but the interlocking melody of their hearts. And then suddenly, the anxiety drained from Bella's face. Jasper blinked in surprise. Her shoulders relaxed, and her expression changed to one of confident expectation. In one smooth movement, she stepped forward, and reaching out with her hand, took Renesmee from Jacob's arms, as naturally as if she had been holding her since the moment she was born. Oh God! Panic ratcheted up exponentially in Jacob's mind as he refused to let go of the baby, instead keeping his hands on her even as she settled into Bella's arms. I glared meaningfully at him, but he didn't look away from Nessie. Nessie sighed contentedly, drinking in Bella's face.
"Bella!"
She smiled and began to very slowly reach towards her face with her hand. Watch it now, thought Jasper in alarm. Renesmee's gift might be extremely unsettling for Bella. I tightened my hold slightly as Nessie's pink fingers came to rest on Bella's cheek, and the familiar vision of Bella, human Bella, arose again. How shocking that image must be for her. We waited, still, our eyes on her face, except for Jacob, who looked only at Renesmee.
"What was that?"
Bella said finally, her voice rough with confusion.
"What did you see?"
Rosalie asked.
"What did she show you?" "She showed me that?"
Bella gasped. I told you it was hard to explain, I said softly, but effective as a means of communications go. What was it? Jacob demanded. Bella shook her head slightly, as if trying to clear her thoughts.
Me, I think. But I looked terrible.
Terrible, yes. It had been only a few seconds later that Bella's heart had stopped, before the world had begun to spiral into blackness. I shuddered at the memory of those dark moments, forever etched into my mind. It was the only memory she had of you, I said. She's letting you know that she's made the connection, that she knows who you are.
But how does she do it?
How do I hear thoughts? How does Alice see the future? I shrugged. She's gifted. It's an interesting twist, Carlyle said, looking at me. The gift of giving thoughts. Like she's doing the exact opposite of what you can. Exactly as I had thought. Interesting, I mused. I wonder if there could possibly be some genetic connection. That's entirely possible, Carlyle mused. Still, I think the gifts come from our own innate possibilities, although, since she is your daughter, some of her genetic predisposition. As Carlyle spoke, I found myself impossibly distracted from his words by the vision of Renesmee in Bella's arms, the way Bella's arms curved around Renesmee's small body, how their heads inclined naturally towards each other as their eyes latched, Bella's dark tresses intermingling with Renesmee's copper curls, creating a mixture of mahogany streaked with bronze rays of sunshine. A new light seemed to enter Bella's eyes, a fierce and protective tenderness as she gazed down at Renesmee, the love of a mother. Bella leaned down gently, pressing her lips to Renesmee's forehead, and inhaled deeply, closing her eyes. Jasper tensed. She's burning. I don't like this. Alice, sensing his stiff muscles, came around and rubbed his arm reassuringly.
She's fine,
she said softly.
Look at her expression.
Haven't we experimented enough for one day? Jacob said uncomfortably. He was practically bouncing with stress, watching Bella's face so close to Renesmee. Her teeth, he thought anxiously. Okay, Bella's doing great, but let's not push it. Bella stiffened, her eyes swinging up towards him. Her anger shot through Jasper, and he tensed.
What is your problem, Jacob?
Bella snarled. She pulled on Renesmee, but Jacob refused to give her up. My family crowded closer, Emmett poising his hands over Bella, while Carlyle and Esme readied themselves to snatch up Renesmee. Gotta say, I agree with the dog on this one, Edward, thought Emmett. This is getting ugly. I was furious. Bella's time with her daughter shouldn't be cut short because Jacob was agitating her, undermining how incredible she was doing. I glared at him, and he looked up, feeling my wrath. It's not safe, Edward. You're too biased to think this through. Biased against my own daughter? I hissed. Just because I understand doesn't mean I won't throw you out, Jacob. I growled. Bella's doing extraordinarily well. Don't ruin this moment for her.
Finally, thought Rosalie. I'll help him toss you out, dog, she snarled. I owe you a good kick in the gut.
Jacob ignored her, his eyes trained on Renesmee now, his thoughts snarled and panicked, his face a flushing mosaic of fear and adoration. She's everything to me. She can't get hurt. I won't let her be in danger. I can't. She's everything. Everything.
No!
Bella cried. Jasper was hit with an uncontrolled blast of shock and horror. Jesus, get the baby! He tried to send a wave of calm into Bella as he threw his other arm back protectively in front of Alice. I wrapped my arms firmly around Bella's body, grasping my wrists tightly on either side. I knew I wouldn't be able to maintain this hold against her strength, and was glad Emmett pressed up close as well. Jacob had grabbed Nessie immediately, stumbling back several feet, Carlyle and Esme on his sides. Damn Jacob and this imprinting business to hell, I fumed.
Rose,
said Bella, her voice seething but steady.
Take Renesmee.